Have you ever wondered why my mother could make a soul-changing meal with only one knife and one iron pot, while modern kitchens overflow with gadgets that gather dust? After 40 years of cooking, I have realized that 90% of what we are told we need is a complete waste. At 65, I use only 5 tricks, the only reason my food tastes the way it does. Today, I opened Doña Benedita's notebook to show you how to cook like a master by throwing away everything else. My kitchen is silent now, in a way modern people do not understand anymore. There is only the sound of wood meeting iron, the gentle crack and pop of bacon drippings warming in my cast iron skillet, steam rising from a pot simmering since before sunrise. I stand with my knife in hand, and this silence feels like prayer. The morning light catches the blade at the perfect angle, and I can see the patina on the steel, dark, almost black in places, worn smooth by 40 years of stropping and sharpening. This blade knows the work. It has never complained. It does not need charging. I was not always this woman. I remember the younger version standing in a mall, holding a glossy box with a food processor pictured on the front, convinced it would change my life. I was 34 and the world had just discovered that speed was everything, convenience was freedom. My kitchen became a graveyard of good intentions. A bread machine wrapped in plastic, a spice grinder that frightened my daughter, an electric grill that delivered only sadness. Drawers overflowed with specialized knives and gadgets, each promising different salvation. The food I made in those years was empty. I was so busy being efficient that I forgot what I was being efficient at. My processed onions were crushed and leaking sadness at the bottom of bowls. My mother's kitchen was nothing like this. She had one cast iron pot, black as coal, seasoned by use rather than bought that way. One knife sharpened on a stone her own mother had sharpened hers on. A wooden spoon, a wooden board, a ceramic bowl for salt. She cooked by kerosene lamp, moving with precision, doing something 10,000 times and ready to do it 10,000 more. When I came home from school, the kitchen was warm, and there was something that tasted like home means, like love expressed through flavor and texture. Years into my gadget-filled kitchen, when I was perhaps 43, my mother passed suddenly. My father gave me her things in a cardboard box, the pot, the knife, the stone, and a notebook falling apart at the spine, stained with oil and wine. The leather cover was cracked. The pages were written in urgent, compressed script of someone who had only minutes each night to write what had been learned. I sat at my own clean, gadget-filled counter and opened that notebook with shaking hands. What I found was not recipes. There were no measurements, no pictures, no numbered steps promising foolproof results. What I found was principles. Observations that read like, the sound the oil makes when truly hot, that particular snap and crackle, that is when you add the onion. No timer will tell you this. Your ear must learn. And fat is not the enemy. Fat is the answer to why restaurant food tastes better than home food. And salt is not added at the end. Salt is added in layers. Each layer does different work. And a pinch of patience is the most important ingredient. The difference between tough meat and tender meat is time. The difference between raw garlic and sweet garlic is time. The notebook was her 5 laws, not rules, laws. Rules can be broken. Laws are the structure underneath everything that works. I read those pages until I memorized them, then began the most painful process of my life, removing things from my kitchen. The first law is the trinity of fat, salt, and acid, what my mother called the Holy Three. 90% of bland food, the reason people think they cannot cook, comes because one of these three is missing or imbalanced. I take my heavy skillet and set it on medium-high heat. I add bacon drippings, the king of fats in the American kitchen. The drippings are not just food, they are information. They are rendered promise transformed by heat into purpose. As they shimmer, I can feel their readiness from across the kitchen. Then I add salt, enough to make you pause, enough to matter. I add diced onion, and when cold vegetables touch hot fat, there is a sound like a gasp, like something alive startled awake. The salt hits onion at the molecular level, breaking down cell walls, drawing out trapped sugars, transforming raw to sweet. The kitchen fills with a smell so rich that you could eat it just breathing it. But most home cooks stop here, the mistake. They think they have something finished. This is where acid enters and everything changes. I take apple cider vinegar, just honest, not fancy, and pour it into the skillet. The violent sizzle, cloud of steam, and smell seems to reach back into your chest and wake something sleeping. The acid cuts the richness of fat in exactly the way your mouth and stomach need it. It brightens everything. This is not recipe instruction. This is chemistry. This is why restaurant food tastes better. Restaurants understand the Trinity and do not apologize for using fat, salt, and acid in proportions that actually work. The second law changed how I move through the world, the law of the single carbon knife. I hold mine to the light and can tell its entire history from wear patterns. The heel is slightly rounder because I have sharpened it thousands of times. The belly shines because that is where protein moves most often. The tip is dark and patinated because that is where work happens. The weight is perfect, just over 8 ounces, enough to do the work if you let gravity help, not so heavy that your wrist tires. This knife does everything. With the flat, I crush garlic and release perfume even mincing cannot achieve. With a rocking motion, I turn a whole clove into paste so fine you taste the idea of garlic, its essence. With point and gentle angling, I butcher a whole chicken in under 3 minutes, following the natural geometry of joints. With a smooth pull, I slice a tomato so thin you see light through it, the interior intact because I am slicing with intention, not mangling with a sawtooth edge. When I had 40 knives, I drowned in options. Paralysis in the kitchen starts with too many choices. A proper knife, a knife that knows you, becomes an extension of your hand. It is not mysticism, it is functional. Carbon steel requires care. It will rust if neglected, but this is not a flaw. It is a feature that ensures you stay connected to your work. The third law is the hardest for modern people, the sanctity of slow time. It is the stew that sits on the corner of your stove for 6 hours, a pot that thinks for itself, becoming greater than sum of parts. I have one right now, started this morning at 6, still on the stove at 11:30, and will be there until sunset. The recipe is simple. Beef chuck cut into fist-sized pieces, onions cut in quarters with rough treatment, carrots cut on the bias as my mother taught me, salt in layers, bacon drippings heating until almost smoking. The beef in an even layer, left completely alone for 5 minutes until a dark brown crust forms, rich with molecules that have gone through the Maillard reaction. Then broth or water with salt and apple cider vinegar, heat reduced to the lowest setting that still produces a gentle bubble, nothing violent. The lid goes on with weight so nothing evaporates, and the pot is left to think. This is where you must have faith. For the first 2 hours, you will see something that looks like disaster. Tough meat, vegetables falling apart, cloudy broth. This is when most panic and turn up heat or stir. You must resist this urge. You must walk away. You must have something else to do. What happens minute by minute is collagen transforming into gelatin. The onion disintegrating is actually sweetening as natural sugars release, becoming one with broth rather than remaining separate. The carrot softening to near dissolution contributes every molecule of its flavor. By hour 4, the smell is so strong and complete that you understand why slow cooking works. The meat has pulled apart without falling apart. There is contradiction in there, but it is true. By hour 6, it tastes like cooking it was inevitable, like this is how food was always meant to be. No speed, no equipment could achieve this. The sanctity of slow time is law of the universe, and once you understand it, you understand why fast food is the way it is. The world wants you to buy machines, but I want you to have more flavor. Doña Benedita never needed a plug to make a feast. I have digitized her entire minimalist masterclass and 5 essential cooking laws into an ebook waiting in the pinned comment below. It is your ticket to freedom from a cluttered kitchen, to cooking older than electricity, deeper than trends, more delicious than anything you can buy. The 4th law separates home cook from something greater, the gold in the pan, deglazing. After I sear meat and it develops a dark brown crust that is rich with a million tiny molecules of flavor, I remove it to a plate. The pan is coated with what looks like burned, wasted, stuck-on food. Most see a problem and scrape it away with water and a sponge, destroying something precious. I see accumulated flavor, essence of meat, fat, and heat, concentrated into brown bits stuck to the bottom. This is fond, the most valuable substance in the kitchen. I take a splash of honest wine or apple cider vinegar and pour it into the hot pan. There is violent sizzle, cloud of steam, and smell from somewhere older than cooking, somewhere humans understand cellularly since first discovering fire. The sound itself is a promise. I take a wooden spoon and scrape the bottom and sides. With each scrape, fond releases from metal and dissolves into liquid. The pan is not being cleaned, it is being harvested. What was burnt becomes golden. What seemed wasted becomes sauce, rich and complete, coating the meat perfectly. This is why restaurant food tastes this way. They do not skip this moment. They understand flavor is not added, it is revealed. The 5th law is the ancestral order, what the French call mise en place. My mother learned this not from culinary school, but watching her mother in rural kitchens where there was no room for mistakes. Mise en place means everything I will need is cut, measured, arranged, ready before I light the stove. I sit at my cutting board for as long as it takes, sometimes an hour, doing all cutting in sustained attention. The garlic first, all of it, in a small pile at the edge. Then onion cut as the dish requires, set in its own pile. The carrots, celery, herbs, each thing in its place, waiting. Salt measured into a bowl, fat ready in its container, broth in a measuring cup, knife and cutting board clean. Every piece of information I will need is already in my visual field. This moment separates disorganized cooks from successful ones. A disorganized cook spends cooking time scrambling. Where is the salt? Why is garlic not cut? Did I remember to measure broth? Heat rises in the pan. Panic rises in the chest. Mistakes happen because attention is scattered. A cook with mise en place can move with the calm of someone who has already won. Cooking becomes meditation rather than crisis. The moment everything is in place, when I stand before the stove with my mise in place, knife sharp, fat hot and ready, salt measured and acid waiting, in that moment, cooking is already 3/4 done. The heat is just the final proof. My kitchen now at 65 is almost empty. Counters are bare except for a wooden bowl holding salt, a container with bacon drippings, an apple cider vinegar bottle, and a ceramic pitcher for lemon juice. The knife hangs on the wall, just one knife, not a set. The cast iron pot beside it, dark and seasoned, the wooden spoon, the cutting board, the sharpening stone, the notebook. These are what I have chosen to keep, and I have never cooked better. Every year I subtract something else. The food becomes better, cooking more focused, pleasure deeper. This is not deprivation. This is liberation. The burden of choice is gone. The burden of complicated equipment is gone. The burden of recipes that do not respect the person cooking them is gone. What remains is pure distilled cooking, the kind done the same way for centuries, the kind that does not require electricity or batteries or the internet, the kind that tastes like home because it comes from deeper than trend. The notebook sits open on my kitchen table. The handwriting is my mother's, but understanding is now mine. She wrote, "A true cook is judged by their hands, not their appliances. Everything else is a waste of time." And underneath, in smaller handwriting suggesting late night after cooking when the kitchen was quiet, "The freedom of less is the only freedom that matters." I pick up my knife now, carbon steel blade with decades of patina, razor edge earned through 1,000 sharpenings. The weight of it is the weight of my mother's hand, her mother's hand, all hands that came before, all hands that understood cooking as meditation, conversation with time and fire, and essential things you need to stay alive. Light catches the blade edge, and for a moment I see myself reflected in it. A 65-year-old woman with hands that know their work, standing in an almost bare kitchen, surrounded by nothing but tools that matter. The cutting board is waiting, the vegetables are waiting, the heat is waiting, the time is waiting, and I am ready. I have always been ready. The 5 laws are not something I learned from a book. They are something I remembered, inherited, something I will pass along. This is the only way food tastes like this. This is the only reason cooking matters. Everything else is appliances gathering dust.